everyone, and welcome to Brussels. Are you an entrepreneur considering an establishment in Europe? Do you want to know what it takes to build a talented team in Brussels? My name is Eveline Ankaert. I am a lawyer specialized in labor and HR law, and I will provide you with a short introduction to the general principles of labor law that a company needs to know when starting business operations in Belgium and when first employing people in Brussels. First of all, it is important to know that employer and employee relations in Belgium are mainly governed by employment law, collective bargaining agreements, work regulations, and individual employment contracts. These employment regulations aim in particular at defining employees' and employers' rights and obligations, and they lay down rules on matters such as hiring and dismissing employees, employment conditions, working time, minimum wage, holidays, etc. Collective bargaining is the key mechanism through which employment standards are established in Belgium. Collective bargaining agreements, or CBAs, are concluded at three different levels. First, a number of CBAs are signed at national level within the National Labour Council. Secondly, CBAs at industry level are negotiated and concluded within the so-called joint labour committees. And third, CBAs at company level are concluded between the employer and the trade unions. It is important to know to which joint labour committee a company belongs, because the company has to comply with the CBAs of the relevant committee. The applicable joint labour committee is defined by the company's main activity. A second interesting element of Belgium is that a foreign company can engage people directly in Belgium without setting up a local subsidiary. Not having a formal subsidiary in Belgium does, however, not automatically exempt a company from taxation in Belgium, as foreign companies may be deemed to have a so-called permanent establishment in Belgium. If you want to know more on this topic, you should watch the video on corporate taxation in Brussels. Do note that companies wishing to hire personnel in Belgium must comply with certain formalities. First of all, the employer must register with the National Office for Social Security, the NOSS. The employer must also subscribe to a work accident insurance with a recognized insurance company of his choice. The employer must set up an internal health and safety service to ensure the employee's health and safety in the workplace. And he must sign up to a recognized external health and safety service for medical health checks and other advice on health and safety. The employer must register with the Office for Direct Taxes to enable the payment of income tax retained at source on employee salaries. The employer must appoint an authorized agent to keep the compulsory employment documents and act as a postbox to which all official correspondence is sent by the NOSS. And finally, the employer must have a set of work rules in place containing specific provisions related to salary and work conditions as applicable within the company, such as the working time schedules, disciplinary sanctions, annual holiday dates, and so on. Although it is not compulsory, it is common practice and recommended for employers to use the services of a recognized payroll agency to manage all payroll-related issues. Usually, the payroll agency acts as an intermediary between the employer and the social security and income tax authorities. When hiring personnel in Belgium, it is important to know that there are different types of employees, such as blue and white collar workers, students, sales representatives, remote workers, agency workers, all with their specific regulations. Belgian employment law applies to any employee working in Belgium. Even though parties are free to define the law applicable to the employment relationship, one must always be in compliance with mandatory provisions of Belgian law, such as minimum wages, working hours, holidays, health and safety, and anti-discrimination. In Belgium, there are also language requirements in HR and employment relations. For employers having their place of business in the Brussels region, all documents meant for staff must in principle be written in French for French-speaking staff members and in Dutch for Dutch-speaking staff members. Should you use documents drafted in English, you can easily replace them in the correct language when an employee or an inspection asks for it. This type of flexibility is not granted in the Flemish or Walloon region, where English documents are in principle null and void. In Belgium, an employment contract can be agreed verbally or in writing. A written contract is, however, standard practice, and some contracts must be in writing to be valid. It mainly concerns the contracts for a fixed term, for a defined job, for part-time employment, or for student work. Common clauses in an employment contract are post-employment restrictive covenants, confidentiality, intellectual property, variable salary, and data protection clauses. Some clauses, such as a non-compete clause, must be in writing to be valid. As for the salary package, do note that in most industry sectors in Belgium, CBAs set down fixed minimum salaries for blue-collar and white-collar workers. Salaries are generally indexed to the rate of inflation. In general, industry CBAs provide the obligation for the employer to pay employees a so-called 13th month as an end-of-year bonus. Irrespective of the applicable CBA, the employer must pay single and double holiday pay to the employees. The single holiday pay equals the normal salary for 4 weeks. The double holiday pay equals 92% of the monthly salary. To be competitive, employers usually provide their employees with some benefits, such as meal vouchers, eco-vouchers, a mobility budget, complementary insurance plans, pension plan coverage, medical insurance, stock options, and so on. These employee benefits are normally considered as remuneration, but are sometimes subject to lower social security contributions and taxes. Social security benefits are financed by contributions paid to the NOSS by both employers, this is approximately 27% of the gross salary for white-collar workers, and by employees, this equals 13.07% of the gross pay. The salary cost in Belgium for a white-collar employee is thus calculated by multiplying the monthly gross salary with 13.92 to include the single and double holiday pay and the 13th month, and by adding approximately 27% employers' contributions. There are various measures to promote employment that reduce social security contributions or exempt employers from having to pay them. For example, for the first hired person, for hiring unemployed persons, young employees, older employees, etc. New employers who employ personnel subject to Belgian social security for the first time can benefit from a reduction for first recruitments for maximum 6 employees, if certain conditions are met. For the first hired employee, for example, the employer benefits from an exemption of employer's social security contributions for the full duration of the employment. With regard to the termination of employment, I would like to point out that in Belgium, both the employer and the employee can terminate an employment contract at any given time. Contrary to what is the case in our neighboring country, the Netherlands, no mandatory preliminary authorization procedure is required. An open-ended employment contract can always be terminated either with a notice period during which the employee normally continues to work or with the payment of a severance indemnity. The notice is calculated based on the seniority of the employee with the employer. Each party may also terminate the employment contract on the spot. This is without notice or compensation for serious reason or for cause. When dismissing an employee, it is also recommended to check whether the employee is not protected against dismissal. This is, for instance, the case for employees who are pregnant, employees who have filed a complaint for harassment, or employee representatives. The employer retains, however, the possibility to dismiss these employees, but he must prove that the employees are dismissed or not dismissed for certain reasons, possibly in combination with the procedure to be met. Finally, if you would consider employing employees from non-European Economic Area member states in Belgium, these employees must in principle obtain prior authorization to work in Belgium and must have a Belgian residence permit. In case of a long-term employment of more than 90 days, Belgium has implemented the single permit procedure. If you'd like to receive more information on this topic, you can watch the video on economic migration to Brussels. It can also be interesting to employ non-EEA employees for the first time in Belgium, because these employees can obtain a unique fiscal regime which is beneficial for both the employer and the employee. This is explained in more detail in the video on corporate taxation in Brussels. These were the general principles of Belgian labor and social law in a nutshell. I hope that I have given you a clearer insight, and hopefully this triggers your interest in setting up your business in Brussels. We hope to see you soon.